In 1941, the world didn't just go to war, it exploded. One dictator turned east to crush a former ally. Another empire crossed oceans to strike without warning. And by the end of that year, no one was safe. This is how the world changed forever. The year was 1941, and the world teetered on the edge of global catastrophe. Europe was already under Hitler's iron grip. France had fallen. Britain stood alone in the West, battered but unbroken. Meanwhile, in the East, the Soviet Union maintained a fragile, uneasy peace with Nazi Germany. And far across the Pacific, Imperial Japan pursued dreams of dominance. Watching the West with growing hostility, the global chessboard was set. But in just 6 months, 2 bold offensives, one in the frozen field of the USSR, the other in the tropical waters of Hawaii, would turn this regional conflict into a truly world war. The betrayal begins. At dawn on June 22, 1941, without a formal declaration of war, Nazi Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the largest land invasion in human history. Over 3 million Axis troops, 600,000 vehicles, and nearly 4,000 aircraft surged across a 1,800-mile front from the Baltic to the Black Sea. Hitler had long despised communism and considered Slavs racially inferior. Despite signing the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact with Stalin in 1939, Barbarossa had been in planning for months. Hitler believed the Soviet Union was a colossus with feet of clay, weak, chaotic, and ready to collapse. He was wrong. Initial blitzkrieg, shock, and collapse. In the early days, the German blitzkrieg was devastating. Soviet defenses were unprepared. Communication broke down. Airfields were destroyed before planes could take off. Entire Red Army divisions were encircled and captured. Hundreds of thousands taken prisoner. By August, German forces had taken Minsk, Smolensk, and pushed toward Leningrad in the north and Kiev in the south. The Soviet Union lost over 3 million soldiers in the first 6 months, more than most nations had in entire wars. But the Soviet Union did not collapse. The frozen front. As autumn turned to winter, German troops reached the outskirts of Moscow, but the advance slowed. Roads turned to mud. Supply lines stretched thin, and Hitler refused to allow retreats or adjustments. Meanwhile, Soviet resistance stiffened. Then came the snow. Temperatures plummeted to minus 40 degrees Celsius. German engines froze. Soldiers wrapped themselves in newspaper and looted winter clothes from locals. Their weapons jammed. Frostbite spread faster than bullets. And then Stalin struck back. Fresh Siberian divisions, previously held back fearing Japanese attack, were redeployed and launched a massive counteroffensive. Pushed by desperation and patriotism, the Red Army drove the Germans back from the gates of Moscow. Barbarossa had failed. Hitler's miscalculation, Hitler's gamble, meant to knock out the USSR in a matter of weeks, had backfired. He had underestimated the scale of the Soviet war machine and the brutality of the Russian winter. Worse, by invading the USSR, he had opened up a second front that Germany could not afford. But even as Europe burned under snow and steel, another storm was building, this time across the sea, Pearl Harbor. On December 7, 1941, at 7:48 a.m. Hawaiian time, Japan unleashed a surprise attack on the American naval base at Pearl Harbor. Over 350 aircraft launched from 6 aircraft carriers, striking in waves. 8 U.S. battleships were hit, 4 of them sunk. 2,403 Americans were killed. It was the worst attack on American soil in modern history. Japan hoped to destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet in one stroke, buying time to seize the Philippines, Indonesia, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies, rich in oil and rubber. But they misjudged their enemy. America enters the war. The day after the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. With near unanimous support, the United States declared war on Japan. Days later, Germany and Italy declared war on the U.S., pulling America fully into the global conflict. Within weeks, U.S. industries began churning out tanks, planes, and ships on an unimaginable scale. The world's largest economy was now at war. The Pacific burns. In the weeks after Pearl Harbor, Japan struck with terrifying speed. They capture Hong Kong by Christmas. The Philippines, despite fierce resistance from General Douglas MacArthur, began to fall. Singapore, long considered an impregnable British fortress, surrendered in February 1942, one of the worst defeats in British military history. The Japanese Empire now stretched from Burma to the Solomons and from Manchuria to New Guinea. It seemed unstoppable, turning the tide, but Japan's rapid expansion planted the seeds of its downfall. In June 1942, American codebreakers uncovered Japanese plans to attack Midway Atoll. In a stunning ambush, the U.S. Navy sank 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, crippling Japan's naval air power. Then came Guadalcanal, a brutal 6-month land, sea, and air campaign that tested American resolve. Disease, mud, and jungle combat claimed thousands. But in the end, it was a victory and the beginning of the long, bloody road to Tokyo. A world at war. By the end of 1941, the war had transformed. No longer confined to Europe or Asia, it spanned continents, oceans, and ideologies. Operation Barbarossa had failed to break the Soviet Union. Pearl Harbor had dragged the United States into the fight. And the Axis powers, once ascended, now faced enemies on all sides. The world had become a battlefield, and the deadliest years were still to come.